Good, happy Monday evening, June 1st, 2020. I'm Riley King, and welcome to this Monday evening of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. We have a lot of news to get to this Monday evening, so let's begin. First up, let's take a look at your COVID 19 in New Hampshire information, what you need to know. And here is a look at that information for all of you right now. There are 4,685 number of people in New Hampshire have tested positive for COVID-19. 1,837,170 number of people in the United States who have tested positive. 245 number of deaths from COVID-19 in New Hampshire. 456 number of people who have been hospitalized with COVID-19 in New Hampshire. And 195 number of deaths from COVID-19 in the United States. Take a look at this map of New Hampshire right here. These are where current cases of COVID-19 are. Manchester, 434. And take a look at this map here. Total cases of COVID-19. Manchester, 1183. Now let's take a look at these three charts here. Let's start with the first chart. New cases each day in New Hampshire. In the purple, daily new positive COVID-19 cases. In the orange, new hospitalizations. And in the red are the deaths. Let's take a look at this chart here. Current cases. In the purple, total current COVID-19 cases. And in the orange, current hospitalizations. And let's take a look at this chart here. Total cases. In the purple, total positive COVID-19 cases. In the orange, total hospitalizations. In the red, deaths. And in the blue, recovered. And let's take a look at this chart here by age group of cases. Female and male of cases, and risk information. And let's take a look at this chart here, race/ethnicity of cases, hospitalizations, deaths, and percent of New Hampshire population. And your common symptoms: fever, lack of smell, cough, chills, and difficult breathing. How it spreads, and prevention tips. And be sure to stay with the Riley King Network for the latest of your COVID-19 information. Latest DHHS data shows 39 new COVID-19 cases, no new deaths in New Hampshire. There are 4,685 known coronavirus cases in New Hampshire, officials say. 39 new positive COVID-19 test results were announced Monday afternoon by New Hampshire health officials. There have been 4,685 known coronavirus cases since the pandemic began. Of those, 245 patients have died, and at least 2,900 people have recovered. Dr. Benjamin Chan, the state epidemiologist, said no new deaths were reported, though additional deaths are under investigation. Chan announced that there were 5 new hospitalizations related to COVID-19. Overall, 456 patients have been hospitalized at some point during their illness of COVID-19. More than 74,000 tests for COVID-19 have been conducted in New Hampshire, and health officials said the state is averaging about 1,800 per day. Anyone in the state can now get a COVID-19 test, regardless of whether they exhibit symptoms or not. Chan said that about 4 to 5% of COVID-19 tests have come back positive since testing begun, while about 4 to 5% of antibody tests have shown evidence of past infection. Despite the low percentage of cases, Chan urged that Granite Staters continue to practice social distancing when in public and to wear cloth face coverings when keeping 6 feet of distance isn't consistently possible. We are at risk, certainly, for seeing increasing numbers of COVID-19 and increasing community transmission. I think the testing numbers point to this, Chan said. The data leaves a high percentage of people who remain substantial to infection because of lack of past exposure or infection. The New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Service Commissioner Lori Shipperton announced that there were no new outbreaks in the state's long-term care facilities. Shipperton also released some updated data about COVID-19 cases and deaths in long-term care facilities that shows New Hampshire faring better than other states across the region. About 1.5% of long-term care residents in the state have died of COVID-19, which is higher than in Maine, 0.4%, but lower than New York, 3.5%. Connecticut, 6.4%, in Massachusetts, 6.9%, in Rhode Island, 8.2%. 29% of the New Hampshire long-term care facilities in New Hampshire have had at least one COVID-19 case, which is lower than the number in Rhode Island, 36%, New York, 38%, and Massachusetts, 51%. Sununu. Racism will not be tolerated in New Hampshire. Governor calls social injustice message to protesters very important. Says violence, looting, riot will not be condemned. Governor Chris Sununu said Monday that racism won't be tolerated in New Hampshire as he urged protesters to continue to demonstrate peacefully. Sununu said the state has been working with organizers planning protests in response to the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The police officer who knelt on Floyd as he was being taken into custody has been charged with murder. The governor said protesters marched peacefully in the state over the weekend, and he hoped that would continue. Demonstrators have been taking place across the country, with protesters demanding more accountability and an end to police brutality. While many protesters stayed peaceful, they tipped over into violence in some areas, and at least 40 cities across the country imposed curfews. About 15 states and the District of Columbia activated the National Guard. Sununu said racism has no home in New Hampshire and won't be tolerated. He said neither will violence, looting, or rioting. The governor said the state is preparing in case demonstrations become violent in New Hampshire. Boston police list 53 individuals arrested after Sunday night violence looting. Let's take a listen to that video from WCVB Boston.
I have some numbers here that are very important. We have 53 total arrests and 1 summons. Why do I even want to mention those numbers? Because I want to break a negative stereotypical view and perception that even though others protested peacefully, that those hell-bent on destruction just came from the inner city of Boston, and that is not the case. So the breakdown is 27 arrested from Boston, outside of the city 24, and from other states 2 arrested and 1 summons. I'm telling you folks, the negative actions will not deter us from remaining together as a community. I say from this day going forward, this should strengthen our resolve to work together.
Okay, and there you go on that video. President Donald Trump to visit Maine swab manufacturing this week. President Donald Trump is planning to visit Maine later this week. The White House said Trump plans to visit Pertine Medical Supplies on Friday. The company manufactures swabs used in coronavirus testing. This would be his first visit to Maine as president. During a call Trump had with governors on Monday, Governor Janet Mills expressed concerns about the potential visit, saying the visit could cause security problems. In response, Trump told Mills that we have tremendous crowd of people showing up, and I think most of them are very favorable. They like their president. The Trump promised Mills that we'll talk to you about that certainly. Mills announced that she will hold a news conference at 5 p.m. regarding the call with the president. Trump administration gave Guilford-based Pertine Medical Supply $75.5 million through the Defense Production Act to boost its monthly production. The money is also being used to create a second manufacturing facility provided by Caribay in Pittsfield, which will open on July 1st. Bath Iron Works also made machines for Pertine to increase its production. Officials said in April that the effort would create as many as 150 jobs on top of the 300 to 500 people already employed by Pertine in Guilford. George Floyd protest in New York updates. Let's take a look at that. George Floyd protest live updates. NYC to impose curfew after another night of mayhem. New York City will impose a curfew and increase police presence after mobs plummeted stores and set fires following a day of protests, Governor Cuomo said. The curfew will take effect at 11 p.m. on Monday and will continue until 5 a.m. on Tuesday. Cuomo said NYPD will be doubled their police force in the city from 4,000 to 8,000. In a fourth straight day of protest in D.C., demonstrators demand justice for George Floyd. Demonstrators are ongoing in D.C. Monday after a weekend of peaceful daytime protests that devolved into destruction and looting at night. Protests near the White House were at times profane, but also peaceful. One group marched through the streets chanting everything from "no justice, no peace" to "beep the police." Protesters we talked to Monday afternoon said they were committed to remaining peaceful and avoiding the looting and destruction of the 2 nights before. We will continue to update this story with the latest developments. The mayor has issued a curfew for the city that begins at 7 p.m. and lasts until 6 a.m. George Floyd, latest updates for North Carolina. Protest over George Floyd's death continued Sunday night throughout the country, including in North Carolina. Here is your update at 5 p.m. about what's the latest. In a news release, the city of Raleigh said anyone with questions about the curfew starting at 8 p.m. can call a hotline at 919-996-2200. The mayor, Mary Ann Baldwin, and Raleigh Police Department did not respond to additional questions about the curfew, including how officers intend to enforce it. We know last night 7 people were arrested in North Carolina. Sunday protest leaves West Palm Beach retail destroyed. Let's take a listen to that video from WPBF 25 News, Florida.
That video shows looters rushing into a shoe and clothing store. Now, the owner says that as soon as curfew set in, his store became a target. This is surveillance video from Soul Villa. Just after 9 p.m. Sunday, the store manager says he counted at least 30 to 40 people running into the store, scouring for merchandise, pulling products off shelves such as clothing, hats, and other accessories, even ransacking the back stockroom for sneakers. Meanwhile, the landlord of Southwind Plaza says this was not a protest, this was a crime.
It's okay to express your political ideas, but another thing is just to go and damage people's businesses. This is a private person. He's a hard-working guy, and this is not fair. They desire to take those goods and to take this merchandise, and that's not. That's not what the protest is about.
Today's the owner's priority is to save whatever merchandise is left and replace the items stolen. He says the damage is over $60,000, and this business, like others, just reopened after being closed for months due to COVID-19.
This is the last thing that we need. It's we have suffered a lot. Business people, as you know, all of this has been closed. All these stores have been closed. And now that we're starting to come back, is the last thing we need.
The landlord says that this was not the only store targeted in this plaza. Now, tonight they are bringing in extra security just to be on the safe side. Reporting from West Palm Beach, Waukesha Bailey, WPBF 25 News.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. LA County, other SoCal cities issuing sweeping Monday curfews after a weekend of chaotic protests. After a weekend of chaotic protests throughout the region, Los Angeles County declared at 6 p.m. curfew on Monday. Also, other counties will be doing curfew as well. And let's take a look at those other counties in California that will be doing it as well, a curfew. Beverly Hills, Burbank, Pasadena, Santa Monica, Culver City, West Hollywood, Long Beach, Torrance, Anthem, Riverside, Ontario. And if you want to see the list of those curfews for California, we will share this link with you on the Riley King Network Facebook page right after this broadcast. And now let's take a look at that U.S. stock market and see how your U.S. stock market closed for this Monday evening. And here's a look at that U.S. stock market for all of you for this Monday evening. Your Dow Jones Industrial Average closed in the green and went up. Your NASDAQ closed in the green and went up. S&P 500 closed in the green and went up. Gold closed in the red and went down. Oil closed in the green and went up. U.S. 10-year closed flat. Euro/USD closed in the red and went down. And VIX closed in the green and went up. Stocks rise to kick off June as investors continue to bet on the economy reopening. U.S. stocks rose on Monday to start off a new month aimed increasing hope of successful reopening of the economy. Those gains come back to back monthly increasing for stocks. What precautions the MTA will take to keep subways safe during Phase 1 of reopening. Let's take a listen to that video from ABC News.
As New York City approaches Phase 1 of reopening, anywhere from 200,000 to 400,000 people will be returning to work all at once. So one of the biggest concerns for New Yorkers, are the subways safe? Well, here to tell us about some of the precautions the MTA will be taking is New York City Transit's interim president, Sarah Feinberg. Sarah, thanks so much for being with us. And it's June 8th right now that Phase 1 of the reopening of New York City begins. Governor Cuomo has said reopening doesn't mean going back to how things were in the past. So how is the MTA preparing for this Phase 1 of reopening?
That's right. Well, it's good to be with you. So the first thing to know is we've been planning for this reopening since the beginning. So we've been planning for this now for many, many weeks. The first thing that we've been doing is cleaning and disinfecting the system. So we now clean and disinfect the stations twice a day, and we clean and disinfect all of the fleet of rail cars multiple times a day. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that the cars and the stations and the buses that people will be getting on are as clean and safe as possible. We're also taking a lot of other steps, making sure that we've got hand sanitizer on hand at stations. You know, masks will absolutely be required, but we'll also have a few masks on hand for those who, you know, for that first day or two forget their mask at home. So we're trying to do everything we can to both make sure that the system is as safe and clean as possible and also communicate with our riders about what they can do to keep themselves safe.
Yeah, and Sarah, as you point out, it was the first time in New York City history that the subway system shut down for those cleanings, but it has certainly been hitting the papers here in New York, the homeless problem that has erupted in the wake of this coronavirus crisis. What are you doing long term to try and deal with that situation?
Well, look, the fact that we've got folks who need and try to take shelter in our system, I think speaks to a much larger problem that the city of New York and that many other cities are facing. But, you know, we run a transportation system, we run a transit system, and while we do our best to offer social services where we can, that's not what our job is, and it's really not what we should be doing, because that's not what we're good at, right? So we count on the city to provide the social services to those who are experiencing homeless, and we make sure that all of the riders leave the system every single night. The system closes down, we surge into the system and do a huge amount of cleaning, and then when we reopen at 5 a.m., the system is really clean and disinfected for everyone.
Sarah, as a loyal subway rider for all of these years, 15 years I've lived in this city, I know how busy it gets. Yes, I'm a big fan. Fastest way to get around the city. But the morning and the evening rush hours, we're packed in very closely together on those subway cars. So even if masks are required for riders, are there officers that will be enforcing social distancing? How will you handle this? Will you hand out free masks to those who don't have them?
Right, spoken like a true New Yorker who uses the system just like I do. You're right. So New Yorkers are used to being absolutely packed like sardines into subway cars in the morning and in the afternoon rush. That's never ideal. And so what we're going to be telling people is you've got to be vigilant about your mask usage, and you should put as much distance between you and the next person, you and other passengers, as possible. Obviously, 6 feet is ideal. If you can't get 6 feet, get 3. If you can't get 3, get 1. Look, I think it's going to take a while for ridership to really click back to where it used to be. And so for a while, it'll be easier to get that distance. But the key is going to be vigilant about your mask usage.
I'm curious what you think about the CDC recommendations that workers should avoid mass transit like the MTA. What do you think about that?
Well, look, it just doesn't work in New York City. So if people in New York City decide not to use mass transit and everyone gets in a car instead, no one's getting anywhere.
Sarah Feinberg, thank you very much for joining us today and for all of your efforts during these times. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, there you go on that video and that report. Thank you for joining us for this evening edition of the Riley King Newscast right here on the Riley King Network. Have a great rest of your evening, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another newscast. I'll have a news report coming up in a little bit. Good night and bye, everyone.